You are in a meeting that runs longer than planned. Someone asks for help with a task that isn't yours. You already have your own deadlines. You pause for half a second, then say yes. Nothing dramatic happens. No conflict. No visible loss. Later that day, another message arrives. A small request. You answer quickly. It feels efficient. Cooperative. Clean. Over time, this becomes your pattern. You respond faster than others. You soften friction before it appears. You adjust your schedule to keep things smooth. From the outside, it looks like professionalism. From the inside, it feels like control. You are managing situations before they escalate. But notice what is absent. No one asks whether you can take it on. They ask when you can deliver. The request arrives already shaped as an expectation. You tell yourself this is how trust is built. That reliability compounds. That being easy to work with creates safety. Yet something subtle shifts. Not in one moment, across repetitions. Your availability becomes predictable. Your resistance becomes hypothetical. Your time starts to feel unowned. The situation never forces a confrontation. That's the point. Nothing breaks sharply enough to draw attention. Instead, the cost distributes itself quietly. In delayed priorities, in decisions made without you, in the way tasks slide toward you by default, you are still respected, but differently than you expected. Not as someone whose limits matter, as someone whose limits adjust. You start noticing it in small cues, requests framed as updates, deadlines assumed, not discussed, gratitude replacing negotiation. The behavior that once felt like choice now functions like infrastructure, always there, only noticed when it fails. And the uncomfortable question begins to form. Not whether being nice is good or bad, but what it teaches others to do next. You start noticing a pattern outside work. You answer messages quickly. You smooth over awkward moments. You laugh when a line is crossed, lightly, to keep things moving. People describe you the same way. Easy, understanding, low maintenance. It sounds like social capital, as if this reputation stores value somewhere. The common belief is simple. Niceness earns goodwill. Goodwill turns into protection when it matters. But watch what actually happens. When tension appears, it doesn't come to you. Decisions are made elsewhere. You're informed after the shape is already set, not excluded, just not centered. In group settings, your opinion is requested last. Not because it's unimportant, because it's assumed to be flexible. Others argue their position. You adjust yours. You tell yourself this is maturity, that you're above ego struggles, that harmony is efficient. Yet notice who the process bends around. Not the calmest person, the firmest one. Niceness doesn't stop conflict. It reroutes it. Instead of friction between people, it becomes friction inside you, unspoken, managed privately. You absorb more than you redirect. You adapt more than you influence. The belief was that niceness creates safety. But safety for whom? The system stabilizes around predictable behavior, around the person least likely to resist, around the one who won't slow things down. Your presence lowers tension, but it also lowers stakes. Others take sharper positions because someone else is smoothing the edges. They push further, not less. Nothing about this looks hostile. That's why it's hard to name. You are still included, still liked, still relied on, but reliance is not the same as leverage, and approval is not the same as consideration. The inversion is subtle. The more consistently nice you are, the less pressure others feel to negotiate with you. And once that pressure disappears, what replaces it is rarely discussed. You begin to notice how requests arrive, not as questions, as assumptions wrapped in polite language. Can you quickly look at this? Just a small thing, it won't take long. Each one is technically optional. Socially, they are not. There is a mechanism operating beneath the surface. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel aggressive. It runs on signals. Every time you accommodate without friction, you confirm a pattern. Not kindness, capacity. Others don't register your internal calculus. They register outcomes, speed, availability, compliance. Over time, your behavior becomes data, reliable data. The system around you updates quietly who can be leaned on, who pushes back, who slows things down. You don't lose respect openly. That would be visible. Messy. What shifts instead is calibration. People stop checking cost when involving you. They preload expectations. They route inconvenience in your direction because it resolves fastest there. This isn't conscious exploitation, it's efficiency. You tell yourself this is temporary, that it evens out, that people will notice the imbalance eventually. But notice how little feedback exists in this system. When things work, no signal is sent. When you absorb pressure, it disappears. Your effort erases the evidence of its own cost. The more smoothly you handle things, the harder it becomes for others to see strain, or limits, or trade-offs. You become easy to use without anyone intending to use you. The hidden cost isn't time alone, it's informational. Others don't learn where the boundary is because the boundary never appears. And without a visible boundary, there is nothing to negotiate against. You remain inside the system, active, present, appreciated. Yet the rules around you are now shaped by what you silently tolerate. The open question isn't whether this is fair. It's how long a system can misread capacity before it starts treating it as obligation. The instinct feels logical. When pressure appears, you reduce it. When tension rises, you absorb it. You respond quickly so things don't stall. In the moment, it works. The situation cools down. The discomfort passes. This reinforces the behavior. Your nervous system reads relief as success. But watch what happens as time stretches. The same response is used again and again across different contexts. What once solved a problem now becomes the default move. The environment adapts faster than you expect. Not emotionally, structurally. People stop preparing alternatives because one option always functions. Yours. Your instinctive response removes friction, but it also removes feedback. There is no signal that something is costly, no interruption that forces recalibration, no slowdown that invites negotiation. The system learns a simple rule. Pressure applied here disappears. So pressure increases, not maliciously, incrementally, rationally. You feel it first as fatigue, then as irritation you suppress, then as a vague sense of being behind. Still, the instinct remains the same. Smooth it over. Handle it quietly. Keep things moving. Because the alternative feels worse. Awkward, disruptive, risky. But notice the asymmetry. Others get clearer over time. They refine what they want. They defend their space more sharply. You get blurrier. Your priorities are flexible. Your availability elastic. The response that once prevented loss now prevents leverage. You are always reacting, never repositioning. The instinct fails not because it is wrong, but because it never updates. It treats each situation as isolated while others are playing across iterations. And slowly, without a single decisive moment, you realize something has inverted. You are working harder to maintain the same standing. The relief still arrives. Briefly. But the baseline keeps shifting. And the unresolved pressure remains. What happens when an instinct designed for peace is used inside a system that rewards firmness? The consequences don't arrive as conflict. They arrive as accumulation. More tasks funnel toward you, more coordination, more Since you're already involved, your role expands sideways, not upward, not visibly. You become the connector, the fallback, the person who fills gaps others leave open. At first, this feels like relevance. You're in the loop. You're needed. But notice what grows alongside it: dependency. Others stop solving small problems themselves. They wait. They forward things to you. You are no longer just helpful. You are a buffer. When something goes wrong, it lands near you. Not because it's your fault, but because it's easiest. The workload increases, but authority does not. You are consulted after decisions, not before them. You execute more than you shape. This is the escalation most people miss. Niceness doesn't stall the system, it reorganizes it. The system learns who absorbs complexity, who absorbs tension, who absorbs blame without pushing it back, and then it optimizes around that. You begin to feel responsible for outcomes you didn't choose, deadlines you didn't set, expectations you never agreed to explicitly. Still, no one is hostile. That's what makes it hard to interrupt. Everything sounds reasonable. Everything is framed as collaboration. Everything relies on your previous behavior. You notice fewer moments of clean refusal. Not because you can't say no, but because the structure no longer asks. The escalation isn't dramatic. It's logistical: more messages, more coordination, more invisible weight. You are busy, but not advancing. And the pressure tightens quietly around one question. How did being agreeable turn into being indispensable without turning into being influential? You start experimenting without naming it. Not by refusing, by delaying, by not filling the silence immediately. A message arrives. You read it. You don't respond right away. Nothing collapses. The task still exists. The urgency softens. Someone else steps in, or the need reshapes itself. This is when a different pattern becomes visible. Most interactions are not about help. They are about placement. Who reacts first? Who absorbs uncertainty? Who stabilizes the situation for others? Until now, you've been reacting, moving toward pressure, neutralizing it. It felt active, responsible, engaged. But reaction always happens inside someone else's frame, after the request is already shaped, after the urgency is already defined. Positioning works differently. It changes what arrives to you in the first place, not by argument, by friction. When your response is immediate, the system routes through you. When it's measured, the system hesitates. You begin to see how little is actually fixed. Deadlines move, requests shrink. Urgent becomes negotiable. Not because you challenged it, but because you didn't rush to absorb it. Others are now forced to manage their own tension, to clarify, to prioritize. You are no longer the pressure sink. This feels uncomfortable. Not ethically, strategically. You worry about perception, about being seen as less helpful, less reliable. But notice the trade. When you stop reacting automatically, people explain more. Ask more precisely. Decide more carefully. Your involvement becomes intentional, not assumed. This isn't about saying no. It's about not saying yes too early. Reaction makes you useful. Positioning makes you legible. And that distinction begins to matter the moment others have to consider whether involving you is worth the cost. The open tension remains unresolved. If removing friction increases leverage, how much friction can you introduce before the system starts pushing back? You begin tracking something you never measured before, not tasks, not hours, energy, how much attention each interaction consumes, how much recovery it requires afterward, how often you reset just to stay neutral. You notice a pattern. The most reasonable requests cost the most because they arrive without resistance built in. There is no exchange, only extraction. You give time, clarity, emotional regulation. What comes back is appreciation, occasionally praise, rarely leverage. This is when the economics become visible. Energy spent without leverage does not compound. It leaks. You can work harder and feel poorer, more involved and less positioned. Others conserve energy differently. They allow friction to exist. They let tension sit unresolved. That tension does work for them. It forces choices. It creates cost. Your niceness removed cost from the system, which means the system never had to pay you. You begin to see leverage as stored tension, not aggression, not dominance, unresolved pressure that makes others adjust. When you absorb pressure, you spend energy to save others from spending theirs. You subsidize the environment. This explains something that never made sense before. Why the busiest people often have the least influence. Why the calmest ones carry the most weight. Influence belongs to those who make interaction slightly expensive. Not rude, not difficult, just not frictionless. Your previous model assumed energy spent would return later, as loyalty, as protection, as reciprocity, but energy doesn't return automatically. It has to be converted, and conversion requires leverage. Without it, effort is just effort, invisible once consumed. You start noticing how often you pay up front. Before terms are clear, before outcomes are shaped, you pay to keep things smooth. Others pay only when forced. This isn't unfairness, it's accounting. The system rewards whoever controls where energy is lost. And the pressure sharpens into a new question. If energy is currency, who have you been funding without ever seeing the balance sheet? Years pass without a clear break. No single moment where things went wrong. Just a gradual narrowing. You look back and struggle to point to losses. You stayed busy. You stayed involved. You stayed useful. But notice what didn't grow. Your role didn't sharpen. Your authority didn't consolidate. Your options didn't expand at the same rate as your effort. Long-term consequences rarely announce themselves. They show up as ceilings. You are known for reliability, but not for direction, for execution, not for authorship. When larger opportunities appear, they move toward people who create friction, not those who remove it, because long-term systems reward clarity over comfort. You start seeing how early patterns lock in. Once you are categorized as adaptable, you are routed accordingly. Important decisions bypass you, not out of malice, but because your input is assumed to be adjustable. The paradox becomes visible only with distance. Being nice kept you safe early. It kept doors open. It kept tension low. But over time, it also kept your position undefined. Undefined roles age poorly. As stakes rise, systems look for anchors. People whose presence changes outcomes, your history of smoothing things over, doesn't disqualify you. It just doesn't differentiate you. You are trusted to handle complexity, but not to own it. This is how long-term drift works, not downward, sideways. You don't fall behind dramatically, you plateau quietly. Others seem to advance with less effort, less involvement, fewer visible contributions, but they accumulated something different, not goodwill, weight. They became expensive to ignore. You begin to sense the cost, not in what you lost, but in what never materialized. Opportunities that never aligned with you, authority that never quite arrived, choices that narrowed without notice. The question pressing now is uncomfortable. If these outcomes are delayed, not immediate, how early does the pattern need to change before the trajectory does? You start watching interactions differently. Who speaks first? Who sets terms? Who absorbs disagreement? Power doesn't appear as force. It appears as a symmetry. Some people can disappoint others without consequences. Others cannot. You notice how your niceness fits into this. When you adjust, the interaction stabilizes. When someone else holds firm, the interaction reorganizes. Power lives in that difference, not in titles, not in tone, in who the system bends around. You realize that being nice made you predictable. Predictability makes coordination easy, and ease removes the need to negotiate with you. Others don't have to consider your reaction. They already know it. This is where the dynamic locks in. Power accumulates around uncertainty, around people whose response isn't automatic, whose agreement is not guaranteed. They create a pause, a moment where others must calculate. You rarely created that pause. You closed it quickly. So decisions learn to move past you, not against you. Past. You are included as execution, not as constraint. When conflict appears, people manage it upward or sideways, rarely toward you, not because you lack competence, because you lack friction. Power dynamics aren't moral, they are mechanical. The system routes influence toward whoever introduces cost for ignoring them. You reduced cost, others increased it. This explains a quiet imbalance. You do more, you carry more, yet others shape outcomes. Your niceness kept you inside the structure, but outside the leverage points. You were always present, rarely decisive, and the most uncomfortable realization forms slowly. Power isn't taken from you. It's never offered. It emerges where refusal is possible, where agreement must be earned. You trained the environment to stop earning yours. The open pressure tightens here. If power responds to resistance, not effort, what happens to someone who has spent years proving they won't resist? You begin noticing divergence. People you started alongside now occupy different roles. Not louder, not smarter, just positioned differently. Some are harder to place. They don't slide neatly into requests. Their involvement changes the shape of things. Others remain adaptable, helpful, always available. You recognize yourself in the second group. At first, the difference felt ethical. One side cooperative, the other demanding. Over time, it looks structural. One identity continues as utility. The other consolidates as constraint. Those who adjusted early became selective by default. Their participation signaled importance. Those who stayed nice became reliable background, always present, rarely central. No one announces this split. It happens through repetition. You keep being the one who can handle it. They become the ones things must be handled around. Your identity forms quietly, not from who you are, but from how often you adapt. You start hearing phrases that define it. You're flexible. You don't mind. You'll figure it out. None of them are insults. That's what makes them binding. Meanwhile, others accumulate a different description. Hard to schedule. Very particular. Strong opinions. Those labels sound inconvenient. Yet notice who advances with them. The split isn't about competence, it's about boundaries made visible early. Once an identity settles, the system defends it. You can work harder, be sharper, deliver more, but the frame remains. You are still the one who adapts. Changing behavior now feels disruptive, out of character, risky, not because people would object, but because it contradicts the role you've played. This is where many hesitate, not out of fear, but out of coherence. Who are you if you stop being the easy one? The pressure isn't external anymore, it's internal. One identity continues forward, cleanly aligned with leverage. The other maintains continuity, but at the cost of momentum. And the unresolved tension sits here. If identity is built from repetition, not intention, how many repetitions does it take before change stops being an option and starts being a rupture? There is a moment when the story breaks. Not loudly, not publicly. It happens when you finally need something. You ask for support, for flexibility, for space. The response is polite, delayed, non-committal. People are surprised. Not by the request itself, by the fact that it came from you, they didn't see it coming. Because you trained them not to. You realized then what the illusion was. That niceness was being stored somewhere, accumulating credit, waiting to be redeemed. It wasn't. What you built was flow, not obligation, not protection. Your past accommodations didn't convert into priority. They dissolved once used. No one feels they owe you. They feel you handled it. This is the collapse, not of trust, of expectation. You were never negotiating future treatment. You were optimizing the present moment. Others learned efficiency, not reciprocity. They remember outcomes, not effort. Resolution, not sacrifice. The kindness you expected to come back was never framed as a debt. It was framed as convenience. You look around and see the structure clearly now. Those who resisted early are met with care when they need it. Their requests carry weight. Yours sound unusual, out of pattern, easy to postpone. This isn't punishment, it's consistency. The system is behaving exactly as it was trained to behave. The illusion wasn't that people are unfair, it's that behavior, without leverage, creates future consideration. You feel a quiet regret, not for being nice, for believing niceness was cumulative. It wasn't stored, it was consumed. And now, standing inside the consequences, a final pressure remains unresolved. If the illusion only collapses when you finally ask for something, how many people discover it only after it's already too late to renegotiate who they are in the system? You start replaying earlier moments with new attention. The pauses you filled. The tension you neutralized before it formed. The times you stepped in without being asked. What looked like generosity now reads as signal management. You weren't just helping. You were declaring terms. Quietly. Each time you smoothed an interaction, you told the system something precise, that your involvement was low cost, that accessing you required no adjustment. This is the deeper layer most people miss. It wasn't the niceness itself that shaped outcomes. It was the absence of friction attached to it. You made cooperation cheap, and cheap things are used freely. Others who appeared less kind were often just more expensive. They required explanation, alignment, concession. So their participation carried weight. Yours carried speed. Speed feels valuable, until value shifts. As stakes rise, systems stop optimizing for smoothness. They optimize for control. This is where the imbalance hardens. Your history of ease works against you precisely when things matter most, when risk is higher, when decisions narrow. People don't reach for what is easy then, they reach for what constrains outcomes. You begin to see how late-stage respect works. It isn't given to those who helped the most. It's given to those who changed the cost structure. You helped reduce cost, others increased it. Neither path announced itself as strategic. One just felt nicer. The realization isn't dramatic, it's cold. You didn't lose ground because you were wrong. You lost it because you were efficient in a system that only rewards efficiency at the lowest levels. The pressure tightens around one final uncertainty. If friction is what gives behavior meaning, what happens when you introduce it after years of removing it without explanation or apology?